So here's the thing. Many of us have drawn a line in the sand because we have experienced some unmet expectations. That's what I describe disappointment as, unmet expectations. But today's conversation is going to help us really navigate through that and let it go. And so I hope you are really ready to reckon with the thing that you have allowed to take priority position for far too long. Today, we're going to deal with those disappointments that have kept us bound. So let's get into it. For the longest time, I secretly wanted more. I often found myself shrinking to fit in, settling for what was comfortable, and even selling myself short. Once I finally accepted that we deserve success and we are blessed with the power to achieve it, I stopped playing small. I'm serious about building a life I love, and you should be too. I'm Denise Taylor of DeniseTaylor.live, and welcome to Embrace Your Power. I help women prioritize themselves, their success, and their happiness. Now let's meet this week's achiever whose story will inspire you to embrace your power and go. Well, hello there. It's Denise Taylor here. You know, I'm always excited to have you join me right here on Embrace Your Power. Now, this is the place where you can always count on me to encourage you to build a life that you love. In fact, it's a promise. God said He wanted you to have life and have it more abundantly. And so that's what I want for you. But even more than that, God gave you power to do it. He said in His word, He didn't give you fear. He gave you power. And I believe when you embrace your power, you can be, do, have, and achieve anything you want. Now, I will tell you, I think those things will be divinely inspired. I think you are created with purpose. And when you tap into that, you will experience long-lasting satisfaction and fulfillment like never before. Now, whether you are watching me on YouTube or maybe you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I want you to know each and every week, this is a valuable connection from my perspective. I hope you are subscribed so that this shows right up in your lineup and we can make sure to be connected each and every time. In addition, I'd love to hear from you. So if you have some feedback for me, be sure to go and leave a review. Go ahead and put that 5-star rating in there. That says to the listening algorithms, there's some good stuff happening here, and to share it out with others. Now, I want you to know my conversation today is an absolutely phenomenal dialogue that I had with my dear friend, Haynes III. He's no stranger to embrace your power. In fact, when I talk to him, I feel we have such good energy with one another that I brought him back again. And today we went deep on some incredible topics that I know will make a difference in your life. The reality is we have all had experiences that showed up as disappointments because we had expectations that went unmet. And typically what happens when we have disappointment is we create these lines in the sand to try to protect ourselves. We create boundaries. And if we don't deal with the disappointment, we can begin to fester and allow unforgiveness to set in. And so those are the three things that John and I are going to talk about today. We talked about disappointments, we talked about boundaries, and we talked about forgiveness. We have to be willing to take the journey to our own safe place. We've got to go through the healing process so that we can arrive and be able to build the life that we love. Build it with confidence. Build it with the assurity that we deserve it, regardless of what has happened. And so I invite you to listen in to this incredibly powerful conversation I had with John, and I will see you on the other side. So I'm really excited to have John back with me. And I'll tell you why. When I had the last conversation with him, I could sense like a Wonder Twin activate kind of moment as
Yeah.
we were dialoguing. And so I wanted to have John back because I felt like there was still more for us to unpack and share. And so, welcome back to Embrace Your Power, John. Thank you for
Thank you.
saying yes to this reoccurrence, this reappearance, which I'm sure will not be the last. I think you're going to find a home here with me, and I appreciate you being open to that. So I want us to just jump right in. As I was preparing for some weeks ahead, I really began thinking about where many of us have drawn lines in the sand and what kind of prompted that. And what came to mind was disappointments, overwhelm, or the necessity of boundaries, and also the necessity to forgive. And so I thought we could spend some time going a little bit deeper on each of those contexts. But I guess for those who may not have met you last time, it is worth me just giving you a chance to introduce yourself again and not be very assuming. So why don't I go ahead and just pass the mic to you and allow you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Denise, you continue to be amazing, and thanks for having me on Heart and Mind. I really appreciate you so much, and I love your gift and the way that it's flourishing, and who you're serving and how you're serving them. So thank you so much. John Haynes III, family and friends call me Trey sometimes, and I am by day VP of HR for a large global multi-billion-dollar company, and I serve the C-suite as their business partner. And at all other times, I'm a leadership and business coach. And my whole makeup is to see leaders get to their starting lines, be freed up, so you all can serve who you were built and constructed to serve. That is it in a nutshell. I love people. I'm a people geek. My license plate says just as much. And my wife would tell you that, do you ever meet any bad people? Yeah, I meet bad people, but everybody has that thing inside them that needs tending to, that needs care, that needs repair, that needs restoration. And I think that God has just given me the ability to see people finished and to understand what that dysfunction is. That's how my engineering mind works, and to be able to put some ointment on it and create navigation to get to healing and repair. And so I got a wife of almost 22 years on October 28th. She's the rock, she's the foundation, she's the order to me being up in the sky at 38,000 feet sometimes. So Gwen is she's the star of the family. And then we got Nana, who lives with us, my mother in love. And then we got Miles. I call him Super Miles. He's our loving 15-year-old, hopefully future movie director and photographer. So we are now located in Ohio, Dublin, Ohio, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just a couple of months ago. So we are moving and going to where the issue is.
It's so funny because as you were talking, when she said, "Do you ever meet?" Would she say a bad person or a?
Yeah.
And what came to mind was if they met you, your desire is for them not to be the same. Like you're
Real.
there on assignment to help them discover their power, to help them discover their uniqueness. And so if you did run across them, chances are they left your presence a different person if they opened themselves to it. And I love that intentionality. I love the desire you have within you to serve. And the other thing I love about you, John, is that you recognize leader is just not limited to the workplace, that
Yeah.
we all have a responsibility to lead or to blossom where we are. What made you embrace that?
You know what? I ran from it for a little while because I thought that, when I started really seriously coaching, like in 2007, I thought I was going to get stuck in the conversations. I thought my gift at some time was going to leave me in the middle of the conversation. But something happened along the way. I don't even know if I could tell you the actual point, but I had no choice but to accept the gift, because the same chaos kept on coming to me to resolve, and the same dysfunction in people kept on coming to me to help out. And it was people who are at the point of transformation and at the fork in the road. And so once I started to notice these tendencies, and that they were not going to go away, and that the gift didn't stop when I got in the middle of the conversation, I really started to try to be obedient to it and submit to it. And I went through this process, maybe we talked about it, of, why me, to why not me, to it is me. And I stopped denying it. And once I stopped denying it, like, the overflow really started to happen. And so that was kind of the turning point.
Oh my God, I love that journey, that 3-part journey of evolution, because ultimately, if we surrender ourselves to grow, to be available, to mature in our experiences, in how we are really called to serve, it is just like that, where it goes from a point of questioning to a point of reckoning to really a point of release, so that you can begin to serve and develop others. So thanks for sharing that with me. All right, so I want to jump in. I want to start talking about disappointment, and I'll tell you where this is coming from. It's because as I continue to serve, what I am beginning to recognize in many of us is that we have drawn a line in the sand, like something has happened to really cage us in a little bit, if I could describe it that way, or make us shrink and play small. And so before I go too far with disappointment into my questions or the things that I have in mind, how would you define that? How would you define disappointment?
Disappointment is, in my mind, if I'm just thinking right off the top of my head, is when the moment and the people don't meet my expectations. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is where you're going. I suspect it is, Wonder Twin. If my expectations are not managed effectively, or if I'm not willing to change them, or if I'm letting my opinion outweigh the truth, like, I'm always going to be disappointed. Like, I'm going to be perpetually disappointment. It's almost going to be like, that's my job, to be disappointed. And people are going to see me as disappointment walking. That's not the life that I want. That's not the life that you want. I'm sure of it. And that's not the life that's expected for us. So let me just pause there, because I could go on it, but
yeah, that's exactly what I had down too, is unmet expectations. And unfortunately, in relationship and otherwise, and when I talk about relationship in this context, obviously marriage comes to mind, but we have other relationships too. We have relationships that we forge in the workplace. We have relationships that we forge with friends. We have relationships that kind of nestle around us. And within the context of them, we have expectations, and when they are unmet, it does create this disappointment. But where I think we stumble sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, is they go unspoken. Like, other people don't know our expectations. And then disappointment comes as a result of them not being met. But oftentimes we haven't even articulated them for them to be understood, or even have a higher probability of being met from those we do have relationship with. So help me discover a little bit more, unpack a little bit more about that notion.
Yeah, I always call it, and I've been doing it even before the term was popular. Like, we have to become adept at, great at having courageous conversation. And not only for fighting for somebody else, but it's also fighting for ourselves. And we have to know the difference between needs and wants. And to be able to articulate our needs to another so that they can help us help ourselves, or they can help the relationship, we have to become good at that. But when we don't, we start to withdraw. We start to lash out. We start to create discord. Somehow, some way, even if we withdraw and go silent, that disappointment is going to bleed out somewhere else. Either it's going to bleed out onto your relationship, it's going to bleed out onto yourself, or it's going to bleed out into your workplace. You're going to replace relationship with work. You're going to replace relationship with vice. And those things are going to get you into trouble, and are going to make the situation that could have been resolved by having a conversation, a difficult conversation, sometimes it's going to make it infinitely worse and sometimes unrecoverable. And that's not the spot that we want ourselves in.
No, not at all. And I agree with you 100% that those courageous conversations absolutely need to be what we lean into. Oftentimes we run from them because they tug on us truly being courageous, us being brave in the moment, us bearing our vulnerabilities, us bearing these instances where we don't really find our strength, if you
Yeah.
will, and we have necessity. But without that, we then almost like throw ourselves into this cycle of disappointment that we have to figure out how to process through. So, if we've made the mistake of not being upfront and not sharing context of what our true needs are, and we find ourselves in the disappointment abyss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Help us process through that. And what do we owe ourselves in that so that we don't get stuck?
We owe ourselves love. We owe ourselves forgiveness. I know we're going to go there too. We owe ourselves some boundaries, not false boundaries, but some boundaries. And we owe ourselves a submission to our end in mind. Let's just say if we're talking about marriage, like if you really believe in marriage and the fact that it's forever, it's not your disappointment that's the end in mind, it's forever that's in mind. And if disappointment is in the way of forever, and you really submit to one, your relationship with God, or two, your relationship with your marriage and with your mate, your job is to be obedient and submissive to forgiving and to having that conversation. So you got to find a way, whether it's getting in your car and singing it out, crying it out, or writing the script down of what you want to say, at least initially in that conversation, setting up, scheduling time to have that conversation, doing it afraid, and admitting your vulnerabilities in the midst of that conversation. Those are all ways that you can address going forward with that conversation. You have to have it. If you believe in that marriage, you really don't have a choice to have the difficult conversation. If you believe in the relationship with your manager, you really don't have a choice but to have that conversation. The real trick is to figure out the navigation and the path towards it. And sometimes you got to talk it out in the mirror. Sometimes you got to talk it out loud. Sometimes you got to write it down so that paper can give you some feedback about actually what you want to say. And choose your words wisely. Like, don't just go off just because you have emotions to go off in. Like, that's just not the way that you want to manage yourself and the people that you supposedly love and care for. So those are a few things that I would offer.
Yeah, man, you are right in the vein. The only thing I would add to it from my own experience, which I'm sure you're going to be able to recognize this too, is sometimes we have to sit in it. Sometimes we have to really sit in it, because in doing so, it helps us to do reflection. There are things that come from truly allowing ourselves to reflect in that moment that helps us out the most, right? We grow from reflection. And if we move too soon, if we react rather than respond, to your point, whether it's with our words or even our actions, sometimes we absolve ourselves from the responsibility of growing through the experience.
Yeah.
Because disappointment doesn't necessarily always mean it was their fault. Disappointment sometimes can mean our choices, our decisions, our experiences, the things that we have driven and that have happened, we had a hand in it. And we may need to learn something about ourselves so that we can shift and grow from it. And we also may need something to help grow us up a little bit. And I think sometimes sitting in it allows for that. Now, by sitting in it, I don't want us to stew. I don't want us to get to the point where we get lost and we can't find our way out. But I do want its perfect work to be done in us, because a test not learned from is going to be retaken, and you typically will fail again if you don't really do the work.
Yeah, you have to study to show that self-approved. Like you have to, that's that reflection that you're talking about. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because that time in the car, that walk, that moment to breathe, that count to 10 allows for reflection. And I'm just telling y'all, like, you're not gonna be happy with it. Like, most of the time, I'm not even gonna give a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. Most of the time, you had some play in even your own disappointment. Even if something was done to you, there's something that you did to create your own disappointment or hurt that you didn't deal with that made you react to a situation where you should have responded much better. Or you you have such the demeanor that you're not accessible, and you don't you're not open to conversation, and you're not open to relationship, and you're not accessible. And when you're not accessible, you make other people move differently around you, which can create that own disappointment, but you set the tone for it. And so you just got to be willing to look yourself in the mirror as you're looking also at what might have been done to you. And that's why you need that time of reflection. So I agree 100% with
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah. And I don't want to be insensitive, right? Because there are life experiences where there could have been something that happened to us, right? There could have been something traumatic that happened to us. But what I think we have to begin to um, give ourselves grace and courage to do is to not get stuck there, right?
Yeah.
So, for as much as we have responsibility in it, there could have been things, whether it was traumatic or manipulative, there could have been things that happened to us. But even with that, we can't allow that to continue to keep us stuck in that space. And so, whether it was at our hand by our choice, or whether it was at someone else's hand and it was caused, how do we let it go and how do we move forward? I guess it's the question I would have for you as it relates to disappointment.
Therapy, coach, prayer, spirituality, all of those things added together, not oars between them,
Mm-hmm.
added together can get you towards some greater healing. And you have to make a decision. I have to make a decision about what my life is to be, because we all have a plan. We all have a plan, period, full stop. And is this, again, this disappointment in the way of my plan? And who else am I supposed to help by getting through my disappointment and healing? So you got to go get, if you're at work, you can do your employee assistance program, get a therapist, get a coach, surround yourself with wise counsel, people who are assigned to your no, and to help you reshape your thinking, and to help you reshape the situation and look at it from a different vantage point. You got to be willing to give up your island in order to get to the right destination. So if you're not willing to do that, you're always going to be stuck back there, which is where you are absolutely powerless.
Oh my God, give up your island to get to your destination. I love that. Oh my God, that was incredible. So here's what I know from my own experience, because I've experienced disappointment before. And what typically happens, just to kind of close this out, is it breeds resentment. Disappointment breeds resentment, and that breeds separation, the island, and isolation. And if you don't take responsibility to do something, you will get stuck somewhere in that cycle. And so those levers, those lifelines that you just talked about are so key. And John, thank you for saying and not or, because all of them play a critically vital role in us being able to move forward. Now, here's the disclaimer I would throw out, that people will often say they don't know who they can trust. They will often say, culturally, we don't want nobody to know our business. What happens in this house stays in this house. And here's the thing I will say to it, and I will let you speak on it as well, is that game recognized game, right? So You are astute, savvy enough to know when you being played. Now, sometimes we won't be honest with ourselves when we're being played, but
Right.
chances are there's something within you that lets you know um, there's something not right about the circumstances. So trust yourself enough, but don't allow that opportunity for distrust to make you stand still. You've
Hmm.
got to pursue it. You've got to give yourself a chance to reach out and heal. What do you say around those notions about I want to just figure it out on my own, or I don't need no help, or I don't want nobody to know my business?
Ridiculous, harmful, um, suicidal. And I'm using these words really on purpose because if you think about it, who got here alone? Not one of us. We all came through something, we all came with something, and even getting to Earth. And nobody gets anywhere alone. So that should tell you right now, if you're really trying to reconcile what some of life is about, like we don't do it alone. And we have to find people who we can trust. And you're going to go through some distrust, some mistrust in order to get to trust. But here's the thing that people really do not understand. Trust is meant to be given. Trust is meant to be given. You're supposed to be able to rely on your faith to discern who and what to trust. Now, when it's broken, then you work on repairing the trust, but it's supposed to be given. And the hurt and the trauma that we go through and the things that happen to us cause us to not trust people. Sometimes we're taught in our families to not trust people. We got to unlearn that because it's the mistrust, it's the automatic distrust that's keeping us from connection. And so you got to reshape how we think about the trusting relationship. Trust first, and then when it's broken, we got to repair it. And you got to have it underpinned, foundationally rooted in your faith. Like it takes you putting out trust where you can't see. It takes you trusting what's around the corner. It takes you marching towards the vision. Sometimes the things that you cannot touch and you cannot bring to reality. It takes you walking towards those things in order to manifest them. So faith, and you got to trust first.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Simply amazing, because it's very, very true. And we if we operate alone, our reach is only so far. The Bible already tells us that by yourself you can only fight off so many, but it almost goes like 100,000-fold just by connecting with one. And so I think it's important for us to really open ourselves up for help, open ourselves up to be
Ooh.
available so that we can get unstuck and move forward. All right, so we're going to shift into boundaries. And we hear about boundaries a lot, especially when it comes to self-care, when it comes to preserving and really keeping ourselves safe. Why is that? What are your thoughts around that?
This is a hard one for me because I believe so much that we set false boundaries because we already assume that we're going to be hurt in a situation that we've probably already survived. And so why am I missing the faith and the confidence to leap again when I've survived everything that I've actually come through? And I did this exercise at work, and maybe we talked about it before, Denise, is if you multiply your age by 365, my number is, what's your number? My number is 18,615. I've survived 18,615 days. So I set my boundaries by how much I've survived. And that's why I'm willing to take leaps. But if you don't realize that I survived everything I came through, I had some broken bones, I had some concussions, I had some bumps and bruises, I had some things cut off, lopped off, but I'm still moving and I'm still marching towards, what I'm supposed to be marching towards. I'm still healthy. I got relationships. I got love. I love myself. I'm going through repair. All these things you have to take into account when you're actually setting boundaries, and don't create enemies before they actually identify themselves. That's the thing that we are so horrible at, is enemy identification. Most of the time when you catch people coming at you, they're really not coming at you. You're just a variable. They come from a place of harm and hurt as well. So we know hurt people hurt people. So instead of looking at the fact that someone might be coming at you, try to understand what their mission and motive is. If their mission and motive is to hurt you, confront that motive. If their mission and motive is to not hurt you, talk to them about what they're doing to you in order to create the hurt in your relationship. This goes back to the courageous conversation, and that will help you set sometimes the right boundaries. But you cannot set boundaries based off of what you have not experienced.
Oh, that's so good. It's so funny because I know you know Pastor Sean Strickland, and one thing that she says that had me really just kind of laughing. She said, while we are out here touting what somebody has done to us, that somebody is on the couch with a therapist because of what we did to them. And so you're right. We do show up in these experiences creating these boundaries before we even understand what the nature of the relationship needs to be. And it's so funny you went that direction with it, because what I am beginning to really reconcile for myself is, for as much as we create a boundary trying to protect ourselves, oftentimes we imprison ourselves with some of these boundaries that are being put in place. And what I heard you substantiating in your feedback is that we're limiting relationship based on past experiences before a person even proves that it's necessary for them. And so while I do agree that in certain contexts, boundaries are necessary for self-care, I think you're right. We have to learn to trust ourselves, right? We have to begin to trust ourselves in the experience, knowing that we learned from what we've been through, and we don't necessarily need to gate ourselves in all the way around before we begin to engage with other people. I was talking to one of my friends. She helps people with weight loss, and she said oftentimes when it comes to weight loss, people want to say, well, I can't have that in the house. I can't expose myself to that. And she said what you have to get to is to the point that you can trust yourself being around it. Because when you try to isolate yourself from the exposure of it, that's not a real scenario. You can't say you won't ever show up somewhere where chocolate cake is going to be on the table. Really? And so it's almost like we have to begin to trust ourselves in the experience. Do you have any thoughts?
Got a lot of them. I got some chocolate cake on the counter in there. So just in case anybody want a slice, it's down. If you fighting weight, you don't have to have no chocolate cake. I digress. So we have the ability to deal with temptation, and God will not let us deal with more temptation than we can stand. And he always creates a door of escape. And so, you know, the truth, then you can deal with that temptation that comes to you. The thing that I wrote down when you were talking and preaching is we create boundaries to heal. So the boundaries are really most of the time supposed to be temporary, because you create the boundaries so that you can get in your cocoon and you can heal, but you're supposed to come out back to the battle. You cannot avoid the whole world. You cannot avoid people. You're just going to create a prison and periods and seasons of loneliness and being lonely. And that's not the life that you're ordained to have. And so you create that boundary in order to get back out and fight. So realize that the boundaries are really temporary, and the temptation that you're trying to run away from, you've been given the power to overcome that temptation, but it also comes with the price of healing. Like you have to be moving towards healing in order to deal with the temptation, in order to make the decision to escape versus give in to the temptation. And you have to be willing to get back out in the fight. This is not, you're not moving away from life. You're not killing your whole life. You're healing with the boundaries and getting back out in the fight. That's really the objective.
Oh, that's so good. Because if you continue to allow the boundary to prevail, you're ultimately cutting off aspects of life. And God said he came that we may have it more abundantly. He came that we would be able to experience to the full until it overflows. And when you start Xing out boundary, allowing boundaries to X out portions of living, then you are not living for full, fulfilled, or fully in what he has really ordained for us to have and to experience. And so as I continue to process boundaries, I love how you phrased it. They are such a necessity for healing, but they are not lifelong, needs. Once you're healed, you should be able to still show up in that space. Because if you have to stay controlled, then you haven't taken the healing journey. And so I love that aspect of it.
Yeah.
The last topic I have for us today was forgiveness. And I feel like forgiveness is important to maturity. It absolutely is important to relationship. And so when you hear forgiveness, what radiates for you?
There's no way that we can go through life without being hurt physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, sometimes all of those things at the same time. And so it takes the presence of forgiveness and us really grabbing onto it in order to get through those things in a healthy way. Those things that are going to be absolutely inevitable. They're going to come, they're going to happen. And so we have to become great at forgiveness. And it takes faith. It does take the setting of boundaries. It does take a greatness in dealing with the disappointment. It does take reflection. It's putting multiple lessons together. And it's also, back to what I said earlier, what's your end in mind? Is your end in mind forgiveness or unforgiveness? Is your end in mind bitterness or to live a life of joy and peace? And if your mission is to live in joy and peace, forgiveness is the gateway to those things. And so it requires obedience. It requires submission. It requires you to do your research and find out what really happened and what part you played in it. Again, it's the combination of all these lessons put together. And I've decided already that I'm going to forgive. Whatever happens from 7:59 on, I'm going to forgive. So I got it in mind already. And that's what we have to keep in mind. I'm going to forgive. That's my objective. That's my mission.
Mhm. What's really interesting, and I've said it before myself too, is that if you're in any kind of relationship, forgiveness is like currency.
Come
Like
on.
you cannot be in a marriage relationship for sure and not be willing to take forgiveness as a part of that journey on a regular basis.
Regular
Like if
basis.
you learn it, if you don't know how to do anything before you become the honey-do lister and the best cook ever, you are going to have to learn to forgive. And it goes back to the fact that we have these disappointments, which are these unmet expectations. We have these experiences that have happened to us that make us feel overwhelmed and challenge our trusting. And so if you cannot begin to operate with a spirit of forgiveness,
Come
you are
on.
going to get stuck real quick, and you are going to continue in those cycles that we talked about with isolation and resentment. And so for me, forgiveness plays heavily into how you navigate through things. And it really begins with learning to not only forgive others, but ourselves. And we struggle at that. We struggle at forgiving ourselves. Why is that difficult?
One, because of something that we said earlier, my expectations. Two, my entitlement to think that this shouldn't have happened to me. Why did this happen to me? I'm bigger than this. I've surpassed this. I come from this family. I have this amount of money. I got this title. I got this regard. Sometimes I'm a child of the king. You thinking that you shouldn't be hurt, like you shouldn't have to forgive because you should have never been hurt in the first place. So they should have never done this to you. We are perfectly imperfect. We are made that way. And so we're going to, by virtue of the way that we are designed, disappoint one another. So that means that you have to learn to forgive. You have to learn to get past the last play. If I'm taking a sports analogy, and what we have to realize, I love how you talked about currency, and I'm equating that to gateway as well, or pathway. I wrote down that forgiveness creates the access for others to heal. And when you forgive, let me make it personal. When I forgive, it lets my wife or my son or my mother-in-law know that they too can heal. They can deal safely with the hurt and pain that happened to them, whether I caused it or whether someone else caused it. It lets me know, if I'm willing to forgive, that I'm giving myself leeway and access to heal. And when that spiritual thing happens at the same time, that's when relationship is really created, and you can learn to get past the dysfunction even more quickly if I'm willing to forgive.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I'll share this testimony simply because I think people need to understand that if you allow this to continue to harbor and resentment continue to run rampant, it it will keep you stagnated and not allow you to show up in ways that you need to. So for me, my experience with my mom, I had mama trauma, and I don't want to unpack it all,
Mm.
but I had mama trauma, right? And so for the longest time, my biggest fear for years is that I would have to take care of her, right? Because when you are someone's caregiver,
Wow.
and you have to begin to meet their needs physically, meet their needs emotionally, and help them navigate through that whole scenario of illness and sickness and all the things that come along with that, it puts a huge demand on you, right?
Real
And
talk.
so for years, I had opened myself up to God to take the healing journey. But I will tell you this, John, you don't know if you're healed until a demand needs to take place on that spot, right? And so in my mind, I'm good. In my mind, I'm moving forward. In my mind, I believe that everything was okay. But it was not until the demand was put on me to show up as her primary caregiver that I was able to see whether or not I had actually gotten over, healed through that process. And so, what I am grateful for, because in that moment, I had so much hesitancy. I had so much that I wasn't sure if I was going to be nice to her, if I was going to be kind, because when it starts to make a demand on you in that way, it goes deep within you. And thankfully, the
Mm.
healing journey and God had done his perfect work in me. And I did indeed be able to show up strong in that moment. But in that moment, she's looking at me because she realizes that there is power being given to me regarding her and her situation and needs. And I'm looking at her with the same degree of hesitancy. And so it is so important to allow ourselves to journey through disappointment, to journey through forgiveness, because there will come a reckoning, right? There will come this time, regardless of whatever it is that you had to face. And we see it culminate in movies all the time. The moment he came back, the moment she had to face him, the moments, right? It will come to a reckoning. And you want to be able to trust yourself in
Come
that
on.
moment to show up with the confidence and the resilience to be able to move forward in such a powerful way. And so that forgiveness journey is imperative. Dealing with our disappointments is imperative because there will be a day of reckoning, and how you show up in that moment will depend on the work you did to overcome that despair.
I wish I could stand up and give you a slow clap right now. I want to ruin the broadcast. I'm just saying that was so amazing. And I was taking mad notes while you were preaching right there. And one of the things that I said is, you really understand your healing. You cannot understand your real healing until the first punch is thrown, and until you get hit again. You ask any athlete where you really don't know you're healed until you come into the game and you get hit again like you got hit before, that created the hurt. And so that's what you were talking about to me. You realize the manifestation of your healing and your forgiveness when the game actually happened and you had to take care of your mother. And I'm so glad and so thankful. You just fed me all the way with that. So glad and so thankful that you submitted to the process. And so many times we have to have patience for that perfect will to be done and that perfect healing to take place. There are a couple more things that I wrote down too. And this is real talk, a business concept. And it's at the bottom of my email at work. Spread love. Love is required as a basis for all three movements that you talked about, whether it's dealing with disappointment, whether it's setting boundaries, or whether it's forgiving. Love is required. The other thing that I wrote down, Denise, that you were teaching, is that so many times we get killed by the disappointment. We do not forgive, and we set inappropriate and wrong boundaries because we believe that the situation that we experience is the end. And it's not the end. That hurt and pain is only temporary. We have to realize that there is more. And if I can, I want to give you a quick testimony as well. There was a job that I worked where I was VP of HR and kind of a tech company. And there was a plan set up for the executives, which I was one of 9 of them, where, if we were acquired, there would be a particular payout. And that particular payout, although not life-changing money, it was a significant amount of money. And somehow, some way, I still don't know the reason today, they left me out of that plan. And there was a transaction. And you talk about being hurt, you talk about crying, you talk about wanting to actually fight, and I mean physically fight, like real talk. Like, I want, like, come outside, like, let's roll around in the grass a little bit, because you shouldn't have done what you did to me. I didn't deserve that, no matter what I've done, if I've done anything. But as I was driving one day after that, and dealing with my pain, because it was real pain, I firmly believe that God told me, chill. I gave you a way to make just as much money as you were going to be given, and more. And that's when I had to realize that just because that did not work out like it was supposed to be working out according to my expectations, there was still greater. And that wasn't the end. And what I found that to be, once I was dealing with the process, meaning letting time go on and leveraging time and timing, I got that money back and more. And some of it was because of the gifting that God gave me. Some of it was because of how I leveraged timing. Some of it was because of I submitted to the vision and the gifting that God gave me. So I had to realize that it wasn't the end. And I forgave those people because there was greater, there was more. That was not the end. And that's what we have to realize to deal with the disappointment, in order to forgive and to set the right boundaries so we can, in fact, heal and get back in the race.
Oh my God, that's incredible. It's so incredible. And what I hope people take away from what we've shared is exactly what you said. Whatever happened, it didn't end there. that is not the end of the story. What happens next, you have complete opportunity to curate and control by learning from that, trusting God in that, and setting your sights on moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think what ends up happening to many of us is we get stuck. We get stuck nursing the pain, singing the blues, and we never really figure out how to truly embrace our power to move forward. And so when we come back, I want you to really share with us your three best nuggets, as if we haven't already shared enough, but your three best nuggets on how we can move forward. So, one of the reasons why I always love talking to John is because we can indeed go to those places where the pain resides. You see, when we deal with our disappointments and we deal with appropriate boundaries and we even deal with forgiveness, it makes us go back to that place of pain. The place where we began to feel something that did not feel right, but we don't necessarily want to deal with it. This is the reason why Unstoppable 2022, my signature Denise Taylor Live event, is so incredibly powerful. It's because we want to help you begin to realize and fully accept that what happened to you did not ruin you. And you can take your healing journey, overcome your disappointment, allow yourself to get past the need for boundaries that imprison you, and forgive yourself. And so this year, we're going to broach some incredibly powerful topics that many of us have experienced firsthand. We're going to talk about the pain and the devastation that centers around miscarriage. We're going to go again after abuse because so many of us have experienced it. And this year, we're also going to be talking about abortion. You see, these life experiences, while they are wreaked with so much pain, we can get over them. We can let go of the guilt and shame, and we can leave the past behind. So I am so excited to personally invite you to this 3-night live virtual event. This event is going to help us really and truly move past the place where we have drawn a line in the sand because of what has happened. I am so excited to have these incredible women that are going to join me and not only talk about their firsthand experiences with these circumstances, but also help us know how they now serve to help other women move forward and leave the pain behind. So Demetrius is going to come and share about her experience with miscarriage and child loss. Neka is going to come and share about her experience with abuse. And Latoya is going to join me to share about her experience with abortion. Now, all of those experiences can make us feel shame and guilt. It can be so disappointing and it can be difficult to figure out how to move forward. But this event, this exclusive life-changing event, is one that will serve as a lifeline for those who are truly ready to leave the past behind. So be sure to go to my website at www.denisetaylor.live so that you can be plugged in and connected to this event. It will not be live streamed. You must register to take part. But I tell you, if you have drawn a line in the sand because of miscarriage, abuse, or abortion, this is one you don't want to miss. All right, John, now that we're back, I want to tee this up for you a little bit because it's something that for the last couple of weeks, God keeps taking me back to. I love how Jesus admonished Mary and Martha to show him where they had laid Lazarus down. And what keeps coming up for me is for many of us in our experience, our belief stopped wherever we laid it down, wherever we drew that
Yes.
line in the sand. That is where we stopped believing. That is where we stopped working. That is where disappointment set in. That is where unforgiveness set in. That is where overwhelm set in. And so God just keeps bringing me back to that passage in that scripture, because many of us are refusing to move forward just like they were. And that choice, it stunned them. It stunned their ability to really see what was next. It stunned their ability to continue to believe, even though they had set up under his teaching. They knew him really well. They were stalled out. And so I want you to just admonish us, right? Many of us have drawn the line in the sand. We are nursing our pain. We are nursing our hurt. We sometimes do it so subtly, but because we keep showing up for life, right? We still go to work every day. We still function with our families, but secretly, we know that we are only operating within the context of a certain range of motion. And so I want you to give us your wise nuggets and help us move forward past this hard thing that made us draw the line in the sand.
My gosh, thank you. Thank you for all of this. This conversation has been healing for me too. And I was if you could see my notes, it's like I went to another place and scribbling all these notes. But some of the things that I would give you, there's at least 4. I know you said 3, but I got at least 4. I think first we have to learn to point to the pain. And that Lazarus situation that you talked about, where Jesus asked them to show him where Lazarus was, like, we have to point to the pain. Like, that's where the death is, so that we can see it clearly. And then we can do number 2, ask for help. You have to ask for help. Nobody goes to this life alone. And I believe it was watching a segment on Kirk Franklin. He was talking about the hurt that men go through. And he was talking about how we will go into our man cave and suffer alone. And that's not what we were meant to do. And so we have to ask for help. There's so many avenues for us to ask for help. Again, I encourage you, I almost push and pull you to get a therapist, to get a coach, to get under a great church leadership, and to find your way to wise counsel. Surround yourself with a good personal board of directors. If it's work, seek your employee assistance program. Find somebody to talk to. And that goes to number 3. Be willing to have courageous conversation and talk about things. Because if you don't, the shame of being hurt, the shame of being disappointed will literally kill you. And not only will it cause you to sometimes commit actual suicide, but it will actually cause you to commit life suicide, and you become part of the walking dead. And that can't be acceptable for the life that you were given. Remember that. That's a whole other workshop. You were given this life, so it's a gift. And I think the one of the last things I have to say is manage your expectations well. Thinking can kill you. How you talk to yourself means everything. And sometimes you have to be willing to unlearn the familial expectations that were set for how you deal with disappointment, and how you forgive and how you don't forgive, and how you set boundaries. Once you realize there is greater, sometimes you're going to have to exit the family, I guess, repetition and learning that happens. So you got to be willing to leave that island and set up the right island with some help and with some courageous conversation. And all of this is underpinned really by two things: in work and in life. It's your faith and it's your ability to love. And you heard me talk about spreading love earlier. I have coined it to be at work, and some people really know this, including the executive team. It is leadership, it is ownership, it is value, understanding your value, and it is evolution. You have to be willing to change and be transformed in order to deal with disappointment, setting right boundaries so that you can heal, and forgiving. So that's what I would offer.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I just want to put an exclamation part to say you're worth it. You're worth you're doing all of those things. You are worth it. And I just don't want anybody to remain stuck. We've been given this gift of life, and I want us to really just enjoy it to the full. So, John, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I'll have to figure out how to get on your calendar again so that we can continue to just build people up, because I think at the end of the day, there's so many people who are going to be blessed around the world because of these conversations that you and I are having. So thank you so much for your yes. And until next time, you continue to keep building a life that you love.
I'm already yes for the next time. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you serve. And so thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one. Well, that's it, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. Don't ever forget that you are truly blessed with life, love, and all the happiness your heart can hold. Be relentless in building a life you love without apology. I'm Denise Taylor, and you can always find me in our free Facebook community. It's Embrace Your Power. Easy to find. Now be sure to rate and review this podcast and share it with a friend. And make sure you subscribe so that we can stay connected each week. And remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He gave us power. So be sure to always embrace your power and go.